Warning: the following podcast might be too truthful for most liberals. Listener discretion is therefore advised.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. This is your host, Mark Galar, and we have a very special show today. We have with us Mary Margaret Olohan, a senior reporter covering culture and politics for the Daily Signal. She's also worked for the Daily Wire and the Daily Caller. She is a graduate of the Catholic University of America and is the proud eldest daughter of an Irish Catholic family of 11 children. Wow. That is an impressive bio if ever I heard one. And wow, 11 kids, huh?
Yeah, I like to sneak that one in there. I feel like it's a countercultural fact. And if you like big families, you instantly bond with it.
Well, I did not come from a big family, but I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 8th, and we had a lot of big families with 11, 12, even 13 kids. In fact, one had 14. Yeah. So certainly knew a lot of families like that during Catholic school. They didn't go to high school back then. That's why I only went to 8th grade. But by the time my son was born, they did. So he went kindergarten through 12th grade there. So I'm very familiar, or at least I think I'm very familiar with your background. And of course, one part of being Catholic is not being willing to put up with abortion. And in addition to that, what's going on with these kids with the transitioning has just gotten ridiculous. I mean, we're living in a bizarro world, I think, where up is down, down is up, left is right, right is left. And we actually live in a world where, how can I put this? Teachers have somehow put themselves in charge of deciding what gender a child should be.
Yep, literally, that is what we have come to.
Yeah, it is, and you're somebody who's doing something about it by ringing that alarm. What's weird to me now, the liberals are the best people in the world at coming up with euphemisms. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But they're saying that this lopping off of body parts, this body mutilation, is, well, they're calling it gender affirming health care. But at the same time, they're saying it doesn't matter what your biology is, that gender isn't what your sex organ is, it's what you think you are. So if that's the case, then why do you have to cut off body parts in order to affirm what gender you think you are? It's very confusing.
It is confusing. And I think that one of the biggest factors that play into all of this is that our culture is grappling with a sense of, with a desire to know who and what we are. No one really understands their identity anymore. And often, some of the most strong people, their identity is rooted in their faith or their family or their purpose here on earth. And I think many people in our culture don't know why they're here or what they're supposed to be doing. And so they search for meaning and identity in places that they're going to come up with answers that are not going to help them. And unfortunately, when it comes to gender identity, many of these people are searching for something that will make them unique, something that will make them stand out, something that will explain why they had these idiosyncrasies that made them feel lonely or sad or scared. And so they grasp onto this ideology that's offered to them by gender activists. And unfortunately, as the people in my book explain, it does not make you happier. In fact, it makes you suffer very much mentally and physically. And if you are so unfortunate as to undergo surgery like a double mastectomy, as Chloe Cole and Prisha Mosley and Luca Hine did, you cannot reverse that. It's irreversible. And that's a very scary and sad thing. And many of these gender ideologists and doctors are promising these young people who are undergoing these procedures, they're promising these young people that they will be happy if they go through these things. That they will be a new person who will be appreciated and loved. And this is not something that any gender ideologist should be promising, not something that any doctor should be promising, because it's not something that humans can promise, right? You can't promise happiness. You can promise that something will make you feel better. If you take Advil when you have a headache, your headache's probably going to go away. That does not guarantee that you will be a happy person. But these medical professionals are harnessing this very human desire for happiness towards very evil purposes. And that is a huge part of what we're seeing going on here.
One of the things you mentioned in the book is that if a child or a young adult goes into a doctor's office that specializes in this type of thing, they are welcomed with open arms. They are typically affirmed within 10 minutes. And then everybody in the world is, willing to do whatever it takes to get this person transitioned. I mean, it's like there's a mechanism of place, and you go in and you push that first domino, and they just keep falling. Everybody's there, already in place. The next step is already there and ready to help you. But if somebody says, you know what, I really made a mistake, I want to go back, everyone from the insurance companies to the doctors don't want to have anything to do with it.
Exactly. And Abel Garcia, I think, laid this out really well. He's one of the detransitioners in my book who's a boy who tried to become a girl. And Abel found that when he was undergoing his transition, his insurance company sent him a letter letting him know that he had qualified for the next stage surgery. So I believe Abel got breast enhancement surgery to try and look like a girl, which he ultimately got rid of when he detransitioned. But the hospitals and his insurance company was trying to tell him, hey, don't worry, you can go farther down this path if you want to. We pre-approved you for your next surgery. And he said he hadn't even asked about it. And then, just like you're saying, when the detransitioners sought help after their surgeries, when they decided that they were trying to detransition, they found that detransition is not covered by insurance. Why? Because it's largely unexplored, because the medical professionals are not interested in helping people who detransition. Because, as many of these young people told me, once you detransition, you're kind of a living witness to the fact that gender ideology is a lie. You're walking proof to the doctors that what they're saying and selling and promising is nothing more than ideology, and experimental ideology at that. And the doctors don't want to see that. They don't want to recognize it or have to grapple with that. And so they would rather you stayed away.
Of course, when you think about it, transitioning in the first place isn't that well known, isn't that well established. And, I feel like they're taking risks there as well. But,
for sure.
And the other thing that's kind of weird about this is that insurance companies normally would prefer not to do expensive surgeries. If you're having angina, chest pain, they tell you go take a statin. They're not anxious to have you on the table and spending $100,000 in the hospital. Well, with this, they don't seem to mind. So what are they doing? Are they trying to improve their DEI score?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of these hospitals are beholden to certain standards and scores, like you're saying. Like, for example, the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, has a scoring index for corporations. First of all, it's the HRC's Corporate Equality Index, something along those lines. They also have a scoring mechanism for hospitals and medical professionals, where they will similarly rate doctors or hospitals based on how inclusive and affirming they are. So that kind of thing absolutely plays into all of this. But the other thing that we're seeing is that in medical schools, doctors and nurses and medical professionals are being taught ideology, such as a man can become a woman can become a man, which we know is not true. And when you have our medical professionals who we're supposed to trust and rely on being taught ideology over biology and science, that's a very scary position to put ourselves in. And, the other scary thing to me personally is that there absolutely are medical professionals out there that know all of this is a lie, and yet they're selling it to advance ideology and to advance a leftist cause. And that, to me, is maybe one of the scariest aspects of this whole situation, in that they know what they're doing and they're plowing ahead to advance a certain ideology, while knowing that they're lying to the public and causing mass harm.
I think that's true with other leftist causes. I mean, take the climatologists who are pushing the anthropogenic global warming stuff. They know full well that's crazy. And a lot of people say, well, that's kind of a victimless crime. No, it's not. People are dying around the world because of measures that are being taken to fight climate change. And once again, they don't care. They keep towing the line and they keep getting grant money. So, and by the way, it's a really old saying, but follow the money. I mean, obviously, you made it clear in the book that there is a lot of money being made doing this, and that certainly plays a role in it as well, does it not?
Absolutely, it does. And I think, one thing people don't often realize is when you get on hormones, you're still buying them on maybe a monthly basis. So, for example, a girl taking testosterone gets her prescriptions from CVS, or maybe she orders them online. She's not going to just take those for a couple months and then suddenly have all these masculine attributes that aren't going to go away. She's going to take them for the rest of her life. That's the goal from these gender groups, is you just take testosterone as a woman for the rest of your life, so that you can maintain your masculine identity. And the same goes for men taking estrogen. And then these surgeries, you start with, if you're a girl, you start with a double mastectomy, you have your breast removed. If you're going to keep going down that path, which they encourage you to do, you get a hysterectomy. You might get fake genitalia, and so on and so forth. For the men, it's even more invasive and horrifying, the kind of surgeries that they do to try and mimic female genitalia. And all of these things are costly. They take a long time to recover from. If they're not done correctly, they involve a lot of follow-ups. For example, Chloe Cole got a double mastectomy several years ago. Her wounds have not fully healed yet. She still has to maintain them. And so all of these things are costly, very involved, painful. But the reality of the matter is that these types of gender transitions pretty much sign you up to be a patient for many, many, many years. And that's, of course, not talked about. And the implication is that you can just undergo this transition and bam, you're a guy, and all your gender dysphoria is going to be resolved and you'll be happy. And that it could not be further from the truth.
You keep mentioning that "you'll be happy" line that they feed these people. And I remember probably over 10 years ago when they were looking at some of these transition cases, it doesn't make them happy because, you find out after you become a different sex that people of the opposite sex still have to go to work. They still have to pay their bills. They still have relationship problems. None of that goes away just because you change genders. So, and I think that's a big part of it. They're overselling this in a huge, huge way. And let's talk about some of the ways they lure these young people into this. Some terms I pulled from your book were top surgery, and bottom growth. Just like they use gender affirming care, as a euphemistic code for having body parts cut off, and they use female reproductive health care as a code for killing unborn babies. They use these terms
Right.
like top surgery, bottom growth. If you're sitting there in a doctor's office, which I did many times because I'm a retired drug rep, and the doctor's sitting there telling you, oh, well, first we'll do the top surgery, then we'll do the bottom surgery. Could be some bottom growth, but don't worry about that. We'll take care. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really register. If this is such a great thing, why are they using euphemistic code words when they speak to the patients?
Well, I think exactly for the reasons that you're suggesting, that the euphemisms are designed to hide the realities of what they're talking about. Um, Also, the euphemisms make all of this sound more appealing. It sounds more medical, more clean, kind of more simple. Whereas when you construct a fake penis using someone's intestinal lining, and then you you construct this fake organ on someone and sew it onto them and have to pretend to them that it's going to somehow work, which it's not. That's a lot more graphic and gross and scary, frankly, I think, to many of these people. And they are certainly willing to suspend suspend their understanding of reality for a little while, right? They're agreeing to these types of surgeries, which many of us would never dream of agreeing to. But the way that they are advertised and suggested to these gender dysphoric people is designed to make them seem more comfortable and just more routine and more medical, I think. And you notice that, like you were saying, with the phrase gender affirming care. Gender affirming care is transgender surgeries, hormones, and puberty blockers, even when we're talking about minors. And the way establishment media talks about all of this, they buy into the talking points that they're sent from GLAAD and the HRC. But the way that they talk about these things, you would never know what we're actually discussing because it's framed as care. So they'll say Republicans are denying care to trans youth. And I think your average American might think, oh, that's horrible. Like,
Yeah.
this care that's being denied to trans youth, it sounds like doctors are refusing to treat them for strep throat or something, right? Like that's what your takeaway is there. When the reality is that these laws are trying to protect kids from undergoing these very invasive surgeries. And these reporters that are submitting to this kind of language perversion are complicit in all of this. And I would not want to have to answer for that kind of perversion of language. And the manipulation of the American public to think in such a manner about this issue because it's deceitful.
It's very deceitful. It's horrible, as you said, that members of the medical community are willing to go along with this. I don't think we can have a conversation about this topic of transitioning without mentioning the role that the schools are playing in it. And one of the memes, and I've mentioned this before on the air, but one of the memes that I saw a couple of months ago was a mother and father. They had obviously just had a baby, and it hadn't been handed to them yet. The doctor still had it, and they said, what is it, doctor, a boy or a girl? And he said, well, I think we better let their kindergarten teacher decide that. And so that's where we are right now, is that somehow, and I don't know when it happened, maybe you can tell me, the schools decided that it is their job to identify kids who would be happier if they transitioned and then help them transition, all the while keeping it away from the parents, keep doing it behind the parents' back. When did we this is almost like something out of A Brave New World or Hillary Clinton saying it takes a village. I don't understand when the schools just suddenly decided it's their job to do this. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think that many of these teachers are at the end of the day activists, right? They subscribe to very activist talking points and framing, and they have been very open in recent years about the fact that they want to change the population's thinking on certain topics by starting with children. And I think many Americans have become disillusioned with this type of rhetoric and thinking, right? Because during COVID, when everybody was home, parents had the opportunity to get a little glimpse into their children's classrooms and realize, wow, I was not aware my kids were being taught this, and I don't want anything to do with it. And so thankfully we were able to put the brakes on a little bit, and now we see legislation protecting kids from discussions of sexuality and gender in the classroom. But I think we do need to be aware that in these cases, that's not just a teacher thinking, oh, I'm going to do the right thing here and make children, protect them from homophobia or things like that. This is individuals going into work every day thinking, I'm going to teach this kid about these topics because I think his parents aren't telling him, and I want him to grow up subscribing to my ideology, not his parents. And in many of these cases, the parents are viewed, especially if you're traditional and religious, the parents are the enemy. The parents need to be kept out of the loop. The parents are the ones that are keeping the children from following their true path. And that kind of thinking is very dangerous. And thankfully, I think most Americans are waking up to it and saying, no, like maybe we're not religious, maybe we're not traditional, but we get the first say in what our kids are taught.
It's remarkable that anybody would ever think it's their job over the parents to discuss these types of things. I don't know when this kind of stuff started being discussed in the schools, but you're right, the parents couldn't have known about it. And you brought up the pandemic and people seeing what their kids were learning. I remember there was one school that sent out a memo saying the parents are not allowed to watch what's going on in the classroom. You're not allowed to be around the computer when your child is in class. And I was just thinking, who in the hell do they think they are? It's
Wow.
ridiculous. Yeah. And they're starting it so young too. I mean, I know the excuse that you mentioned about, the kids not being homophobic and all that. No, uh, these kids are being groomed, and that's what this is all about. There was a video on YouTube of a grandfather going by the kindergarten classroom to pick up his grandson, and I'm not sure what the circumstances were, if he got there early or what, but when he got there, his grandson was in a dress,
Oh my gosh.
and he was saying, who authorized this? Who made the decision to put my grandson in a dress? And I guess she had her line down. The kindergarten teacher kept saying, "Sir, if you have questions about our school policies, you'll need to take it up with the principal."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's infuriating.
Isn't
That's
it?
infuriating. Yeah, no, imagine being that grandfather going to that school to pick up your little kid and finding out that suddenly your kid has been a victim of the ideologist at the school, and he's their next target for all of that. That would just be, it's unthinkable.
And I saw another video where a kid said his son's first day of kindergarten, the teacher asked him if he identified as a boy or a girl. So, I mean, and then I guess what happens is the kid doesn't know what identifies means when he's in kindergarten. So he says, "I don't know." So the next thing you know, they're saying, "Well, little Billy doesn't know if he's a boy or a girl. We better look into this." I mean, it's just
Right.
ridiculous what they're doing. So, but you tell me. I feel like the schools are recruiting, social media is recruiting, the mainstream media is recruiting, the entertainment industry is recruiting. Who's doing the most damage? Is it all of them collectively, or is there one particular guilty party that's pulling more kids into this?
That's hard to say. I think at the end of the day, the biggest offender here is social media. I think kids who have phones and access to social media are very, very much at risk for being exposed to gender ideology, especially if they're unsupervised. You wouldn't allow your 8-year-old daughter to go up to her room alone with a number of adults and lock the door, right? And
No.
just talk about whatever you wanted. But that's what you're doing when you allow your daughter to go upstairs and lock the door and go on her phone. And even if you think that she's only interacting with kids on Snapchat or on Instagram, let's say she's not interacting with any pedophiles or any adults or any perverts online. She's still being exposed to content that is too much for her, whether it's images of women that are too, these images of women that are on the internet nowadays are so aggressively sexual and fetishized. She's going to be thinking, okay, that's what I'm supposed to look like, and I don't look like that at all, so that's scary. And then, the pornographic images online are constantly exposed to children. And for little girls who are exposed to this at a young age, their thought is, that looks scary. I don't want anything to do with that. That freaks me out. And it looks like the woman is being demeaned and humiliated. I don't want anything to do with that. And then let's say they get exposed to some tame gender ideology. They're thinking, I don't really want to be a woman, and it looks scary and it looks too hard. Oh, maybe it's because I'm a guy. And that scenario that I just laid out is far too common. And things that parents should be aware of, like very basic things, or like, let's say your kid has Snapchat. Snapchat might seem like an app where you just send pictures to your friends and you can message and stuff. It also has an entire little function when you swipe right on it, where kids can get their news from Snapchat. And guess who advertises to kids through these news platforms? Planned Parenthood, GLAAD, all of these very, very lefty organizations. And I remember being on there in high school and swiping right and seeing information about polyamory, seeing information about sex toys and all kinds of inappropriate topics for kids that are marketed to young people. on this app very knowingly. So all of that is to say that parents need to be aware that when they're allowing their child to have a phone, they are basically giving their blessing to the internet to impact their child in ways that they have no idea what will ensue and no idea how to control it. So easiest way to handle that, in my opinion, is to not give your kid a phone, or at least not give your kid an iPhone until you absolutely have to, because it's way too easy for things to go wrong.
It certainly is. We need to take a quick break, and then we will be right back with Mary Margaret Olohan. And I'd like to talk a little bit about rapid onset gender dysphoria when we get back. And we are back with Mary Margaret Olohan, the author of Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. I said before we left that we were going to discuss rapid onset gender dysphoria. Tell me, with all the research that you've done on this, are the kids that are experiencing the rapid onset gender dysphoria more than likely the kids that have been groomed into it very quickly by all the sources that we discussed before?
That is often true in many cases. I mean, all the detransitioners that I interviewed for my book, they encountered this type of content online. In fact, we often hear about kids being influenced in school. I write about this all the time for the detransitioners who are in my book. That would be Chloe, Prisha, Helena, Luca. All these girls encountered gender ideology on the internet. And they did have a few people in their lives that they would say were identifying as transgender, but that wasn't really what started them down this path. For Helena, for example, she stumbled on content on Tumblr. And for Chloe, I believe a lot of this content was on Instagram, just kind of depended on the social media site. And they were very much groomed by adults that they encountered online or members of the transgender community who would push them to, consider themselves as transgender, or in Prisha's case, would evaluate her current mental health issues and say, oh, this is because you're actually a guy. And so those are huge factors for all of them. I will also say that many of the detransitioners in my book believe they were on the spectrum, and they were lonely. They didn't fit in very well at school. Their parents might have had some sort of issues. For example, one parent was alcoholic. In another family, the parents were getting divorced. In another family, there was just very little emotional connection. Another family, the parents' relationship was struggling as well. So just a lot of family turbulence and not very stable home life. For Chloe, for example, she grew up in a family with a bunch of siblings, but her siblings were all older. So she felt kind of disconnected and like she was alone and looking for companionship online, which was unfortunately leading her to the wrong circles.
There seemed to be some sort of family problem, some sort of mental illness that predisposes one toward this type of thing. And with that in mind, I want to ask you, if you were a counselor and a child came up to you, or a teenager or a young adult, and said, I think I'm in the wrong body. I think I want to be a boy or a girl or whatever. What would you tell that person that hadn't even taken the first step toward transitioning, who told you that? What would you warn them? How would you warn them?
Well, I'm no therapist, but I wouldn't recommend seeing one these days. I would want to know why they think that they're a boy, or let's just say in this example, it's a girl. I would want to know why they think that they're a boy. I would want to talk to them about what depictions of womanhood were making them feel that they didn't match up. I would want to know whether there was any kind of sexual assaults or sexual abuse in their background. I would want to know who their girlfriends were, whether they had had any girlfriends, had any healthy female friendships. I would want to know if they were eating properly, if they were working out properly. Even kids, even teenagers should be getting healthy exercise. I would want to know what their family's relationship was like and how their parents interacted with them, what their faith life was like, if they had any. All of these things are so important to the healthy development of a teenager. And I think most of all, I would say, look, if you want to do this, that's not something that I can prevent you from doing, but you shouldn't be doing anything while you're still growing and changing. Your body is figuring out just how to be you, and there's no point in hurting your body at this time in a way that you can't take back. I would probably tell them the stories of detransitioners that I have told in my book, especially stories of people like Prisha and Chloe who had never considered if they might want to nurse their baby someday. And after they got a double mastectomy, realized that opportunity had been completely stripped from them. And I would probably remind them that people like Prisha and Chloe had never even thought about whether they wanted to have a baby, because when you're a teenager, you're not really thinking about these things. So these stories of detransitioners, I personally feel, are a huge asset in helping people understand what this is like and what it is to go through a gender transition, attempted gender transition, and why it can be so detrimental to your mental and physical health. But I think that understanding what someone's life looks like on a number of different levels is very vital to understanding what they're going through. And as many of the girls in my book told me, and able to, young people nowadays need to be affirmed that you're loved, you're unique, you are a human person with dignity. No one wants to take your dignity away, but don't rush into anything. You have time. No one's trying to force you to be anything. You don't have to be a girly girl if you don't feel like one. Just take your time, live a healthy life, and progress towards adulthood. And I think that's very key, is reminding young people, there's no rush here. Just relax, because the transgender activists will have them believe that there's a rush to do something quickly. And that of course, is what propels a lot of these people to take action so swiftly when there's no need.
And as I recall from the book, they also like to tell the parents that, if your child doesn't transition immediately, they're going to commit suicide. Would you rather
Right.
have a dead daughter or a live son? That type
Right.
of thing. So they do try to force them to make a quick decision. I know we've gone over a lot of the book. I always like to ask my authors, is there anything in the book that we've missed? Anything else that you'd like to tell my listeners?
Yeah, I would just recommend that people read the last chapter about Abby Martinez and her daughter Yaley. And it's a very sad chapter. It's the rest of the book is about detransitioners who reverse their transitions and are living happy and fulfilled lives. And I hope they will continue to do so. But the last chapter is about somebody who did not make it and who ultimately threw herself in front of a train. And it's a heartbreaking story. And Abby, the mother, cried to me on the phone as she shared it. But I included it to help people understand the realities of gender ideology and the realities of what these types of activists and state officials are doing when they try and push your child towards these types of transition procedures and hormones, and that parents do know best. Parents should be beside their kids, and gender ideology is a dangerous thing that can take your child's life, unlike what the activists and medical professionals are telling you, that your child will take their life if they can't access so-called gender-affirming care. It could not be further from the truth.
Once again, the name of the book is Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult by Margaret Olohan. I want to thank you very much for being here today. I assume the book is available wherever good books are sold.
Yes, you can find it on Amazon, and it will be coming out officially May 28th, but you can pre-order now.
And are you available for public speaking as well?
Yes, I am.
Very well. And how would someone go about getting in touch with you? Do you have a page on the internet or?
I do. You can contact me at marymargaret.olahan@dailysignal.com.
Very good. Once again, Mary Margaret, thank you for being here today. You are indeed a very, very brave person. I can't even imagine all the attempts to cancel you and to threaten you and everything else that you must be going through right now. But the world needs more people like you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.